great. Okay, 588. So we're starting Parsha Shemini. So now Lenny asked the last week, we did not lane Parsha Shemini because it was Shabbos Yontif. So we didn't lane it. So now we're going to be, and then after this, we're going to have 3 sets of double headers coming up. There's going to be, next week is Tazria Metzora, and then we're going to have Chremos Kedoshim, and then we're going to have Bahar B'chukosai. So it's all going to get, it's going to be 3 double headers in a row. Okay. Vahi Bayom HaShmini. Now this is the 8th day of the inauguration of the Mishkan. Vahi Bayom HaShmini Kora Moshe LaAaron uLevonov. Moshe summons Aaron and his sons, uLeziknei Yisrael. Now, the first question is, why is he summoning them if they're there? Remember, they were camped out by the entrance of Hol Moed the entire time. So why is he calling to them? They're right there. Korah, he's calling them. So there are 2 ideas here. Idea number 1 is that you just did a mitzvah. They were doing all these mitzvahs, they're all 7 days. And the attitude should be, this is now a new mitzvah. So I am now summoning you. It's like, symbolically, I'm calling you to do a new mitzvah, which is always a trick in Yiddishkeit. Each day of putting on tefillin. How did you feel when you put on tefillin after Pesach the first time? It was good, right? Actually, sometimes I get that feeling. I'm not Joe Spiritual, but like I get that feeling the day after Pesach, like, hi guys, I missed you. I thought my tefillin, I haven't put on tefillin for 7 days. That's how we should feel every day when we put on tefillin. Chol Hamoed, we don't put it on. The minhag, we don't put it on. Some people put it on in private. Some people put it on in private. Some people put it on l'chatchila. I think in America they put it on. In Israel, you don't put it on. Then there's a question of what do you do if you're an American living in Israel? If you're davening in Israel, you don't wear tefillin in the shul. What you do is you put it on betzina. Betzina means you put it on privately. This is also, by the way, a very, very tricky area of halacha. Very tricky. For Americans coming to Israel, you have to keep a 2nd day yontif. Unless you have a psak, unless you're Sephardi and you follow Rabbi Yosef's psak, that you don't have to. But if you're not living in Israel, if you're an American and you're visiting in Israel, you keep a 2nd day yontif, which is always everybody else around you is doing malacha, and you can. So there are certain leniencies. You could ask somebody who lives in Israel. You could ask him to do stuff for you. He could be your Shabbos guy. When you're keeping yontif, you could ask somebody to turn the light on. That you're allowed to do. That's not as complicated. You just keep a yontif. You're here in Israel. You keep a yontif, and it may be a little odd. But it's not so complicated. The real complication, and it's tricky, and I've been through this quite a few times, is when you leave Israel to go to America. And I keep 1 day in Israel, because I live in Israel, and I'm around 2-day people. Now the halacha there is, and a lot of people are not aware of this, my daughter just went away for a Pesach program, so she's in Spain at a hotel for a Pesach, as one of the helpers in the Pesach program. So I went over the halachas with her before she left. When you leave Israel to go to Chutz La'aretz, if you're living in Israel and you're a 1-day person, in Chutz La'aretz, if you're in a Jewish area, you're not allowed to do malacha. You don't keep yontif. It's not yontif. So that means you daven weekday davening. You daven weekday davening, and you don't do malacha. You put on tefillin in private, but you're not allowed to do malacha if you're in a Jewish area. If what's called a Jewish yishuv. That itself is debatable what's considered a Jewish yishuv. There's after once you get into town. Somebody said once you get to New York, and the New York airport is already a Jewish yishuv because half the workers in the New York airport are Jewish. So you're going to have, I was once coming off a plane to Los Angeles. I was leaving Los Angeles on a Motzei Shabbos. So I go through, and because I have a Middle Eastern passport, an Israeli, what do you call it? So I always, very often I was getting like a second security check. I'd finish past, everything is fine. I passed through, nothing buzzed. And then the cop would call me over for a secondary check. So I come through in Los Angeles. I finish my, because I look suspicious. So I finish my, I do the thing, up over there, the thing. They check me. I'm fine. I go through. There's a cop. He had a big, thick mustache, and he calls me over, and he's about to frisk me. He goes, "It's Shabbos is over already. You can travel. It's Motzei Shabbos. You heard of Abdullah?" Yeah, that was in Los Angeles. Yeah, then he frisked me. But the one time I said to the cop let me go. I said, "Aren't you going to frisk me?" Come on, I got to tell my kids I got frisked, don't ruin my trip. So that's, it gets very complicated when you're going to Chutz La'aretz, and you're a 1-day person in Chutz La'aretz, because you can't do malacha. But you're not chayiv to make kiddush. You don't make kiddush. You're not chayiv in a seder. So I used to go, my in-laws, so I would sit with them at their second Seder. But it wasn't a Seder, it was no Kiddush for me, just watching. But it's a very tricky to back and forth, very tricky. According to some poskim, second day people in some poskim, I'm not telling you what the halakha is, most people do not abide by this. There are poskim that say that if you're a 2-day person in Israel, you could ride a bus or a train or something else that's being driven by a Jew. Now that's not the standardly accepted psak, but there are poskim who say that. So it's a very tricky thing. In any event, so Moshe Rabbeinu calls them, Kriya, Moshe Rabbeinu calls them symbolically. In other words, why doesn't it just say Vayomer? Why did it just say Vayomer? They're right there. They're right there. So it should say Vayomer Moshe L'Aaron Ulevanov. That's really where the question's coming from. Why does it say Vayomer? The answer is because I want you to know we are now going on to a new mitzvah. Don't just think, all right, here we go again. Yeah, we were just here for 7 days already bringing korban here. Okay, here we go again. It's a new approach, and it's an attitude in Yiddishkeit, number one. Number two, the word kriya is a term of affection. It's a term of pleasantness. And Moshe Rabbeinu, up until this point, was serving as the Kohen Gadol. He had the position. Now he's giving that over to Aaron. So you could understand that, Moshe Rabbeinu, if you have a position, one of the hardest things, there's a Gemara that says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia, I think it was Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia, he said, if anybody would have come to me to appoint me to a position, I would tie him up and feed him to a lion. I don't want the responsibility, and I don't want the promotion, and I don't want to be the rabbi, and I don't want to be the leader. I don't want. Once I've had the position, if anybody would try to take away from me, I would pour a kettle of boiling water on them. All right, you have to understand what he means by tying him to a lion, a kettle of boiling water. The point is, he didn't want it. But once he was there, what happened? Why is that? Why is it that if he wanted to avoid it, yet once he had it, he would be very, very guarded about giving it back? Why? Why? Anybody got an idea? He'd be very, very resentful about giving it back. We find this in Nach, by the way. Who's the classic example in Nach? Shaul. Excellent. Shaul Melech. When they were looking for the coronation, he was hiding. He was nechba el hakelim. He was hiding somewhere in the back of the barn. Yet, when Dovid HaMelech now gets the appointment and he's going to become the king, and Shaul knows that, then he wants to kill Dovid HaMelech. What happened here? What happened to Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia? Are
we saying power corrupts?
No, it's not a question of corruption. Well, it does, by the way. Power does corrupt. Not tzaddikim and not Sanhedrin and not the Rebosha Feinsteins of the world. Power doesn't corrupt them, but it corrupts politicians, that's for sure. Power does corrupt. And how does the expression go? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Never heard that expression? Yeah, of course. That's a the
same Pirkei Avot, it says stay away from the rabbinate.
Stay away from it. And so a lot of people tried to avoid it. What do you say, Len?
Well, it's like if you told your kids, like, you never help out, and then they try to help out, and you're like, give me that, like, you can do it wrong.
That certainly has. I've experienced that, by the way, as a kid, because I did everything wrong. Listen, for me, Erev Pesach was in Moses.
Like, how can you trust somebody to be the king when you're currently the most qualified to be the king? You're already kinging.
Okay, because the prophet has said that he's going to be the king. So Hashem said it.
But that's why he's so.
I mean, he's protective of it because he thinks, but he knows that Dovid HaMelech is qualified. It's not corrupt. It's not corruption.
Are you trying to save someone else from the responsibility?
No, that'd be very noble, but you wouldn't be pouring boiling kettle. Listen, I'm going to do you a favor to save you from responsibility. Have a kettle of boiling water. What do you say?
Maybe once he doesn't want that responsibility to do it, but once he has it, now he doesn't want it to be taken away. He wants to be chayav.
Why? What do you say?
He wants to fulfill that.
Well, okay, it could be. It could be.
You grow into your responsibility.
Right. You become. That becomes you. It becomes you. It's not that I want, but that's who you are now. I wasn't that before. I don't want that. But once I'm there, that you're taking away my essence at that point. I once asked a fundraiser here at the Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, believe it or not, was having financial problems. I know it's hard to believe. You know what Rabbi Schiller said when he started Ohr Somayach, Rabbi Schiller, so when they had the idea to start a yeshiva for Baalei Tshuvas, So somebody said to him, there were always naysayers in life. There's always somebody to try to discourage you from doing something good, which means you're probably doing something good. If nobody's discouraging you, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. So they said to him, where are you going to get students? And where are you going to get teachers? And where are you going to get funding? And Rav Schiller said, 2 out of the 3 problems got taken care of very quickly. The funding is always an issue. So I once asked one of the main fundraisers, no longer working with the yeshiva, but I asked him, I said, I understand. A guy, you go to fundraise, you go to ask a guy's worth $80 million. He can't write out a check for $1 million going to make a difference in his life? It's going to make such a difference in his life? He said, you don't understand the psychology. When a person has a certain amount of money, I have $80 million, I am $80 million. That's me. When I make, the stock market goes up. So for a certain amount of time that I've earned another $2 million, that's surplus. And from that, I give 10%. That's surplus until that becomes part of my essence, and now I'm $82 million. But that's surplus. I'm not no different. Nobody's going to, when you come to fundraising, nobody's going to cut off a finger and give you their finger. They're not going to cut off their hand and give you, they're going to cut off part of who they are. So when a person sees himself, that's identified. That's who I am. When a person rises to a position, that's who you are. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Kohen Gadol. And obviously, Moshe Rabbeinu's motivation at that level is because of the mitzvahs that you could do and because of the schus of the rabbim, and you bring merit to everybody else. Yet, Moshe Rabbeinu giving it up to Aaron uses the word korah. Korah means a term of endearment, that I'm doing it graciously. I'm giving it over graciously. And this is particularly true of Aaron, who had given up his position. His position was taken away from him, but had given it up graciously. Okay. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to Aaron the following. Vayomer el Aaron, kach lecha egel ben bakar lechatas. Take a calf as a sin offering, ve'ayel le'ola tamimim, and a ram, unblemished, ve'hakrev lifnei Hashem. Now, what's the first thing that strikes you about this command? Take a calf, an egel.
He's the one who
He's the one who was involved with Egel. Very good. Aaron himself was involved with the Egel. Now he's going to bring that as a sacrifice. So we're going to see 2 problems over here. Take a look at Rashi for a second. Rashi's the right column. Rashi's the right column. Oh, by the way, I skipped one point where it says, "And call the elders of the Jewish people." In the first pasuk, it says, "Vanav Ziknei Yisrael," and then he's going to assemble all the Jewish people over here. Now, why is Moshe Rabbeinu assembling this? So you can understand that, Moshe, just by comparison, only by way of comparison, John Kennedy was the president, and he appointed his brother Robert at 33 years old to be the Attorney General of the United States. He happened to be a very good Attorney General. He went after the mafia. But, what's the word? Nepotism. So Moshe Rabbeinu, sure, you're appointing your brother as the Kohen Gadol. You can imagine there are some murmurings among the people. Yet Hashem says, get everybody together. I want everybody to see, because there's going to be a demonstration here that Aaron's going to bring korbanos. A fire is going to come down from heaven. This is a demonstration. I've chosen him as a Kohen, not you. And this is a lesson that's lost on a certain man, which is by the name of Korach. Korach challenges for the Kahuna Gedola later on. How do you explain that? You were there? He's a Levi. You were there. You saw Aaron was chosen. A fire will come down from heaven and burn his offerings. Fires don't come down for me. Say, if I would have brought an offering, there's no fire. So what's with Korach? How could you possibly deny what you yourself saw? Good question, isn't it, Benny?
Yeah.
How could you deny? How could Korach eventually get involved in a dispute with Moshe Rabbeinu? You saw what just happened. The answer is, we'll see later on in Parsha, Korach understands he's chosen. Korach doesn't have a problem with Aaron. My problem is that you, Moshe, have an influence on God. You influenced God to choose Aaron because of nepotism. If you would have influenced God to choose me, so I'd be the Kohen. You understand how ridiculous, how jealousy, and Moshe Rabbeinu overcomes that jealousy over here, and he appoints Aaron. Okay, now take a look at Rashi at Pasuk Beis. Kachalcha egel lehodia. It's the bottom line in the right column. He takes Aaron is going to bring an egel Lehodia shemechaper lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu al yidei egel zeh al ma'aseh egel. This is an indication that God forgives him for the incident of the egel. Now, this brings a very big question. The Gemara says that we don't use the horn of a cow. What's the male cow? A bull, an ox. We don't use an ox horn to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Why not? So Gemara uses an expression which you find elsewhere, ein kategor nasa sanegor. The prosecutor does not become the defense attorney. The calf was the egel. We're not going to take a ram, a horn, from a calf or the calf family and use that to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah because ein kategor nasa sanegor. The prosecutor is not going to become the defense attorney. So the Mefarshim ask over here, I understand, Aaron's bringing a calf? After sinning with a calf, he's bringing a calf? Why? How do you get around that ein kategor? Where else do we find it? That either the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur does not wear gold when he enters the Holy of Holies. For that reason, ein kategor nasa sanegor. The gold was the prosecutor because the golden calf. So why is it that over here, all of a sudden it's okay to use the calf? It's okay to use a calf over here, but it's not okay to use the shofar. Again, your first name is? Naftali, yeah, go ahead.
I believe possibly because it was to show that Aaron wasn't even part of the egel. The idea is into what he was with the egel. So maybe this is to show.
Excellent. He says the idea is to show that Aaron wasn't part of the egel. He was part of the egel, and his sons. But he helped delay things by having them make the egel. That's why we're going to see later that Moshe Rabbeinu says, approach the altar. Kravel HaMizbeach, approach the Mizbeach. Because Aaron himself built a Mizbeach when they had the egel. He built a Mizbeach, but the purpose was to stall. It was a stall tactic. Okay, so that's one possible answer. So the Mefarshim explained there's a very big difference between the two. When you're going to do a mitzvah, which is blowing the shofar, so then ein kategor nasa sanegor. You can't have the prosecutor become, we'll do the mitzvah with the very thing that you did the avera with. But when you're trying to atone for an avera, so then to the contrary, the very thing that you did the avera with, that's the way you could show, I'm now devoting this to God. I'm taking a calf and devoting it to God, as opposed to what we originally used the calf for. There, you could atone. The Gemara says, let's say a person has sinned immorality. A person has done an avera and he stumbled in the area of immorality. What is the ultimate sign that he's done tshuva? That for a person who is, people stumble. It happens all the time. What is the ultimate sign that a person who has stumbled, he's had an illicit relationship, what's the ultimate sign of tshuva?
That he doesn't do it again. If he's faced with the same scenario, he turns it down.
Exactly correct. Osa isha ba'oso makom. The same woman in the same place. In other words, he has the same opportunity, and nothing stops him from sinning other than, I had a friend years ago, I had a friend who was somewhat out of control in many areas of life. And he started out, he started out, you named the area he was out of control. And he started, except for idol worship, that he never did, I think. But everything else, murder and idol worship, no, but everything else that you can name, anything that you shouldn't, that could get you arrested, he did. And so eventually, he started on the road to tshuva. He started becoming about tshuva, and at a certain point, the opportunity arose, and he walked away from it. And I remember at the time thinking, okay, now I have no doubt that he is going to become a full-fledged Baal Tshuva. And he did, raise a beautiful Torah family. There's no doubt. I said, at that point that the person has done that, we had a guy here once at Ohr Somayach. This is an unbelievable story. This is a long, long time ago. It was one of my first years here. This guy was an FFB. What does that stand for?
From birth.
Or fractured from birth, as the case may be. But he was an FFB, and he went off completely. And then one day he was in a bar, And at a certain point, he told me he hadn't put on tefillin in years. He was in a bar doing bar things. And at a certain point, everything bar none, at a certain point, he said to himself, this is really stupid. The next day, he got up, he put on tefillin, he fasted the entire day. He fasted an entire day to do tshuva. He became a complete Baal tshuva, then eventually got involved in outreach. So sometimes you see that a person makes the supreme sacrifice. Had another guy here who was, this guy was a script writer, a comedy script writer. And his goal in life was to become a script writer, a Hollywood script writer. He had a twin brother who was living with a non-Jewish woman. He started at a certain point, he went off to Hollywood, and he was there for a couple of years trying to get the big break, which never happened. So he was waiting on tables and eating apples and tuna fish for a couple of years, like everybody else in Hollywood looking for the big break. And the big break never came. In the meantime, he went back to Chicago, got involved with a Rav in Chicago, and started becoming a Baal Tshuva. 2 weeks, the Rav finally said to him, listen, you're doing great, but in order to really cement the process, you're going to have to go to Ohr Somayach. Bought a ticket. It was 2 weeks before he was ready to go to Ohr Somayach. There was a major Hollywood producer in Chicago shooting a movie, got a hold of one of his scripts, and he offered him a job as an in-house writer. I don't know what in-house writer means. It means full-time Hollywood. So the guy said, okay, I'll become a from Hollywood script writer. So the Rav said to him, you will either be from or you will be a Hollywood scriptwriter. You are not going to be both. He agonized over it. This was his goal. He was 26 at the time. This was his goal in life, and he walked away from it and he came to Ohr Somayach. He told me his brother was living with the shiksa, cried. His twin brother cried because here he was. This was his goal, and this nutcase was convinced by this cult leader to go off to Israel. So eventually he came here. He had struggles while he was here, but I knew he was going to make it. I knew he was going to make it because he sacrificed. He sacrificed, and I had no doubt. And Baruch Hashem, he made it. Where's a Torah family, Baruch Hashem. So you know, that's what it takes. So, ein kategor nasa sanegor means if you're doing a mitzvah, don't do the mitzvah with the item that you just sinned with. If you're trying to atone, so then you could atone with that item. And therefore, that's the ultimate atonement, is to show the very thing that I sinned with, I will now dedicate it to God. It would be roughly the equivalent of a guy who's involved in credit card fraud, and eventually he decides he does tshuva and only uses his credit card to make donations to shuls and yeshivas and to give tzedakah, something along those lines. That's the ultimate demonstration that you're doing the right thing. Okay, take a look at Pasuk Gimel. V'al b'nei Yisrael tedaber lemor kechus seir izin lechatas. Take a goat as a sin offering. The egel v'keves b'nei shana temimim la'ola. And again, an egel, they need the egel, and a keves, which is a sheep, as an ola. Now, what's the difference, gentlemen, between a chatas and an ola? You remember the basic difference between a korban chatas and an ola? When you bring a chatas, a sin offering for doing what?
Purpose.
For actions. A korban ola, we said, is brought for what? For thoughts, inappropriate thoughts, or neglect of a positive command. Why does Aaron bring his egel? If you look at the second line of the Torah, it says he brings an egel as a chatas, as a sin offering. The Jewish people collectively, they bring an egel as an ola. Why? Why does Aaron bring his egel? Remember, a chatas is a female. A chatas is a female offering, because we said because women are involved in action, and an ola is male normally because men are involved in thought process. Why does Aaron bring an egel as a chatas and the Bnei Yisrael bring an egel as an ola? What do you say?
Based on maybe what Naphtali was saying, that Aaron wasn't involved in the egel, so the difference is Aaron thought was not involved.
Excellent, perfect. That's exactly what the Mepharshim say. That means Aaron brings it as an action because it was an act. He was involved actively in the egel. But his thoughts weren't there. To the contrary, the last thing he wanted to be doing. The Jewish people, there were Jewish people who were fully in. They were fully invested in the egel. Therefore, they have to bring it as an ola, number one. Number two, we go for a little bit of a ride. Where in history, where did we find in the history of the Torah that a goat, he brings a seir izim. How does he translate a seir izim? A goat, a he-goat, right? A goat. Where do we find a goat ever in Torah, that a goat's involved in the story?
Is the goat the same as a ram? What's the difference?
No, a ram is a sheep. Sheep, that's not the same family. Ram is a male sheep.
Oh.
Ram is a male sheep. A goat is a goat. A ram is a sheep. They're both called the flock. They're both called tzon. And for the Korban Pesach, you could take either one. You could take either a sheep or a goat. But there are other korbanos where it could only be a sheep, not a goat. A goat and a sheep are two different families.
The Yom Kippur.
The Yom Kippur goat goes off the cliff. Where else? It's interesting because the word "aiz," my friend Rabbi Yaakov Minkus, he told me the word "aiz" comes from the word "az." "Az" is brazen, bold. The Gemara says the goat walks at the head of the flock and the sheep follow. He's the brazen one. It says the most brazen nation among who's the most brazen nation of all the nations? Do you know who it is? Here we go, guys. The Jewish people are the most az shebenu umos. We are the most brazen people. And it takes a certain amount of brazenness in order to survive a couple thousand years of being told to do things wrong. And we say, no, we're not going to do it. We'll die rather than do it. It takes a certain amount of brazenness. So a goat is brazen. Where else do you find a goat? How did Yaakov deceive his father? Goat skins. No accident. You need certain brazenness to go in there to deceive your blind father. Especially a Yitzchak who's a Navi. Where else do we find a goat? One other place. The brothers, when they dipped Yosef's clothes in goat's blood and then brought it to you, which also takes brazenness to go up to Yaakov Avinu, who's not blind, and try to deceive him. So it all revolves around the goat. Now, if you go back and think about it, the Jewish people, now listen to this, it all connects very nicely. The Meshech Chochmah says like this. You see, Yosef's brothers, Yosef went to Yaakov Avinu and he snitched on them. He said they were doing certain things wrong. What's the halacha if you see somebody doing something wrong? What are you supposed to do, assuming you have any influence at all? What are you supposed to do?
You go over to them.
You go over to them. You don't yell at them. You don't confront them. But you try to you try to point out. Listen, I think you can do better than that. It's called hocheach tocheach. You're supposed to rebuke the person yourself. Yosef's brothers thought, "What are you snitching? What are you going to Dad for? Why don't you come up and talk to us?" In other words, Yosef's brothers had, according to the Meshech Chochmah, they had at least minimally a good, valid reason that Yosef is doing something wrong, and therefore they have the right to sell him and deceive the father. At a minimal level. That's fine. Why were they saying that? They're claiming that, well, instead of going to Dad, you should have come to us. But they all assumes that if you would have come to us, we would have accepted your rebuke. Okay, as long as that's true, then they have a semi-valid reason for doing what they did. When does that reason get kicked out of legitimacy? That reason is rejected. You know when that reason is rejected? At the Egel. Because what happened at the Egel? Somebody got up and tried to rebuke the Jewish people. Who was it? Hur. What happened to him? They killed him. Oh. Why do they have to bring a goat? The goat's an atonement for Yosef. This goat is an atonement for Yosef. What's it got to do with this now? Because you're also bringing an atonement for the Egel. That Egel retroactively, says the Meshech Chochmah, that Egel retroactively, you sinned at the Egel, you didn't accept rebuke, retroactively that knocks out your original excuse by Yosef. And therefore now you got to bring a goat also to atone for Yosef. That's what the Meshech Chochmah says. That's the connection. In other words, what's the goat got to do? What's an atonement? In other words, the idea that this goat is an atonement for Yosef, what's it got to do with this now with the Mishkan? Okay, then do something else. Do it some other time. Why do you got to do that now? The answer is because it's the atonement at the Mishkan that retroactively shows you that Yosef, that was all an excuse. And you wouldn't have expected, your descendants didn't accept the rebuke at the Egel, you wouldn't have accepted the rebuke there. Okay. Now, take a look at, brings a few other korbanos, and then take a look at Pasuk Hey. Where is the, one second, where is the Pasuk Vav? 1 second. No, Pasuk Zayin. Okay, take a look at Pasuk Hey. Vayikhu es asher tziva Moshe al pnei Omoed. They take what Moshe commanded to the entrance of Omoed. Vayikrevu kol ha'eda vayamdu lifnei Hashem. And the entire congregation comes and they stand before Hashem. So Moshe Rabbeinu then said, that's Pasuk Hey. In Pasuk Vav, Vayomer Moshe zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem tasu. This is what Hashem has commanded you should do. V'yera aleichem kavod Hashem. And after you do that, if you do it and after you do it, then Hashem's glory will appear to you. So here the Mefarshim say that there are certain things, we all would love. Think of a mitzvah that you do that you really get a rush from doing the mitzvah. Certain mitzvahs that you do, you really, you feel, wow, I'm really connecting. I got that buzz. There are other mitzvahs where you don't get such a buzz. Certain mitzvahs more, certain mitzvahs less. Certainly, sometimes you don't get such a buzz. Gentlemen, cleaning for Pesach, I don't know, maybe you got paid to do it. I didn't get paid to do it. I didn't do that much cleaning, that's the truth. But I helped clean up after Pesach this year. First time in years that I did this. Normally my wife says to me, just go. She says, yeah, go, just leave. Leave the house. Because the kids are in the house to help out daughters. But there's nobody home to help. So I did it this year. I'd be lying if I said I did it b'simcha. I grumbled, groused, and kvetched and complained until to this morning, still complaining and kvetching about what I did 2 nights ago to cleaning up for Pesach. I would love to say that I did it with the same enthusiasm that I do the mitzvah of eating cholent. I didn't. That's the truth. So we would love to do things in Yiddishkeit, and there's a mistake that people make because people think there's a prerequisite, and the prerequisite is if I do mitzvahs, I should really feel an intense connection with God. That's not true. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. We have to do it because Vayikhu es asher tziva Moshe. They did it because Moshe said to do it and stood before God. Then Moshe said, this is what Hashem said to do. V'yera aleichem kvod Hashem. God's glory will appear to you. But it doesn't necessarily appear right away. It takes time to experience, I don't know what the correct word is, the intensity of the connection or the sensation of the connection. Sometimes, you know as well as I do, there's sometimes where you just feel you're clicking. You just feel you're plugged in. And there's that connect. Sometimes it's not always that enjoyable. It's just not always that enjoyable. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Nobody said, it doesn't say anywhere that you do the mitzvahs and it's a prerequisite. If you do it, you're going to get that. But I've had guys say to me over the years, I've had guys say they put on tefillin for the first time and they didn't feel anything. What would you like to feel? So many people think that if you're going to put on tefillin, so the first time you're obviously going to experience like a tefillin buzz of some sort. And the answer is, you don't. You may experience a buzzing in your arm if you've pulled the string too tight, and you're going to get your arm may feel like it fell asleep. So then you loosen up the straps. Sometimes you feel good. You feel good about the mitzvah. It doesn't say anywhere there's a prerequisite. It doesn't say anywhere that's a prerequisite. So here the Torah is telling you, the Moshe says, V'yera, you do what you have to do, then Hashem's glory will appear. Now let's go to Pasuk Zayin. Vayomer Moshe. When you go home, and you have to honor your parents. Honoring parents also isn't always just a walk on the beach. And sometimes it's very, very draining and it's very, very difficult. It's called the most difficult mitzvah. So some people are thrilled with every second that they're doing that they're doing the mitzvah. But it's not always easy. It's not always easy. And you don't always, but you're doing a mitzvah. Right. Sometimes you'll feel it and sometimes you won't. Okay, now take a look at Pasuk Zayin. We have to do Pasuk in the Rashi. Ve'omer Moshe el Aaron, Kravel HaMizbeach, approach the Mizbeach, and this is what I told you all earlier, when Moshe Rabbeinu says approach the Mizbeach, that's because you built the Mizbeach to delay. You did a good thing by building that Mizbeach by the Egel. You certainly had good intent. Therefore, you get near the Mizbeach. V'aseyes chatoscha v'esoloscha, do your offering, your chatas offering, your olo offering. V'chaper ba'adcha ba'adam, atone for yourself and the nation. V'asey es korban ha'am v'chaper ba'adam kasher tzivah Hashem. Okay, you're going to do the atoning. Excuse me 1 second. Let's look at Rashi. Left column, second line. Kravel HaMizbeach. Shehaya Aharon Bosh. Aaron was ashamed. The Yorei Lageshes. He was afraid to approach. Omar lo Moshe. Moshe said to Aaron, Lama ata Bosh. Why are you ashamed? Lekach nivcharta. This is why you were chosen. This is what you were chosen for. Alternatively, lekach could be translated as this is why you were chosen, or it could be translated as this is what you were chosen for. Aaron was hesitant to approach. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, what are you ashamed of? Aaron says, listen, I made the egel. I'm going to go bring an egel? I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed. He says, no, this is exactly what you were chosen to do. You're chosen to bring an egel, and that's going to be an indication to the entire Jewish people that your avera has been atoned for. So Aaron, now, the Mefarshim go to town on this, because he says to Aaron, why are you hesitant? That's why you were chosen. So one of the Mefarshim says, what does that mean? It's the very trait of being embarrassed and ashamed and feeling unworthy. That's exactly why you were chosen. Why are you embarrassed? You feel you're unworthy? That's exactly the reason why you were chosen. You have the inherent quality of feeling unworthy. In other words, in order, this is also a mistake Korach made. Why was Aaron given, let's go back now. How did Aaron merit to be the Kohen Gadol? How did he merit to be the Kohen Gadol? Because Aaron, when he was told Moshe is going to be the leader, it says, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe says, no, I don't want to be the leader. I got an older brother over. I'm taking his position. Aaron was the leader in Mitzrayim. Now I'm going to, and he says, V'racha v'samach b'libo. Aaron will see you and he'll rejoice in his heart. He'll be happy. He won't be jealous. What did Aaron get as a result? He becomes a Kohen Gadol. He gets the heart that wasn't jealous is the heart that's now going to wear the choshen with the gemstones on it. So Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, he says, don't worry, he's not going to be jealous. That's why he merited to become the Kohen Gadol. Who wants to become the Kohen Gadol later on? Korach. Why? He's jealous. You are inherently disqualified. The fact that you want to be Kohen Gadol disqualifies you. How's that for torture? Okay, I don't want to be the Kohen Gadol. Well, why can't I be the Kohen Gadol? But I don't want to be the Kohen Gadol. See, I don't want to be. How come you're not appointing me to be Kohen Gadol? Oh, you want to be. I told you. Can you imagine somebody I would like to be an F-15 pilot. The problem is I'm scared of heights. And my eyesight isn't perfect. Okay, you're not qualified. What are you not qualified? Anti-Semitism. You know, every time a Jew does something wrong, it's the guy speeding 90 miles an hour on a side street. Cop gives him a ticket. Anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism. You're speeding. I would give you a ticket no matter what you were. Every time a Jew embezzles or does something wrong, anti-Semitism. No, it's not. You deserve it. So over here, so Moshe Rabbeinu says you've got the quality. Being embarrassed. That's why you were chosen. Number one. Number two, my brother-in-law, Rabbi Avram Cohen, from Talmud Chacham, lives in Cleveland. So he told me, sometimes in life, a person, you may be qualified and you may have a certain gift or a talent, and you're afraid to use it because you don't want to become haughty or arrogant. And Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to Aaron, what are you embarrassed about? Lekachli, you were chosen because you've got the qualifications. You're worried about so nobody will do anything in life. You do it and don't be arrogant, but that's your qualification. Lekach nivcharta. That's why you were chosen. Number three, one of the Parsha says brilliant over here. When Moshe Rabbeinu was originally sent by God, so what did he do? He resisted. Now at a certain point, Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, not me, send him. They kept going back and forth. And at a certain point, he crossed the line of resistance. There was too much resistance. At that point, the privilege of becoming the Kohen Gadol was taken away from him, and it was given to Aaron. Aaron had to qualify for it. He did. He wasn't jealous. But Moshe Rabbeinu also had to have it confiscated from him. What did he do to have the Kohen, to lose the merit of being the Kohen Gadol? He was too resistant. So Moshe Rabbeinu, according to the Meforshim, he was saying to Aaron, well, why are you ashamed? That's why you were chosen. In other words, you were chosen because I was resistant. So don't be resistant now. The very reason, that's why you were chosen. Because I resisted. That's why you were chosen. So don't make the same mistake.
What did you resist?
Moshe Rabbeinu resisted originally when God sent him to redeem the Jewish people. So Moshe Rabbeinu kept saying, no, send Aaron, send this. He kept going back and forth with it. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to Aaron, don't make the same mistake. But you also have to know that if you have an ability in life, use the ability. The Medrash says if you have a beautiful voice, you should be the chazan. Just don't let it go to your head, that's all. It's like the guy comes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I'm a great chazan, but I'm just a little bit, I'm pretty pleased with myself. My head is starting to swell. So the rabbi says, well, just turn around and look how the congregation's laughing at you. That'll humble you pretty quick. A bacher once came to Rav Gifter. It was the Rosh Yeshiva of Cleveland. He was very, very sharp. So this bacher came to Rav Gifter, and he said to Rav Gifter, he said, I have a problem with my haughtiness, with my gaiva. So Rav Gifter looked at it, he goes, you? What have you got to be gaiva-dick about? that reduces him. There's a story with Reb Chaim Kanievsky, that's all. A big Rav came to him, in the custom is if a Rav walks into a chaz, have you ever heard they say, Yamim al Yemei Melech, they sing the song. So this Rav walks into the shul, and at a wedding, what happens is when you have a wedding, as soon as a big rabbi walks in, the band immediately stops whatever they're playing. They start playing Yamim al Yemei. Everybody turns to this Rav, comes through Chaim Kanievsky, and says, I have a problem. I go to these weddings, and as soon as I walk in, they start playing, and it's, I'm getting a little gaivadik here. So Reb Chaim looked at me and goes, Ata yeled katan? Are you a child? Even Reb Chaim himself, people came to complain about Jewish music. The Jewish music is out of control. It sounds goyish. It sounds this. And Reb Chaim said, I don't know. It sounds very nice to me. Why did he say that? Because he never listened to music. The only time he ever heard music was when he himself would walk into a wedding and they would play this Yum. That was the only thing. That's a nice tune. He didn't know the difference. Yeah. Oh, I say something. What's wrong with Jewish music? That was the only music he heard. Okay. So that's one thing. There was one other point here on post-exile. Just 1 second. Where is it? One last point here. That Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to Aaron, listen, I know what you're worried about. You're worried, like every rabbi. You have a rabbi of a shul. And the rabbi of shul, either he retires or he moves away or he passes away, and they appoint a new rav. What's the standard form of suffering for any new rav? Is the comparison to the old Rav. Oh, the old rabbi, he was a much bigger Talmud Chacham, and he was a better speaker, and he was he cared about people. It's always when you take over, you can be compared. And Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to Aaron's like, oh boy, I really don't want this. I know what's going to happen. He's like, well, Moshe Rabbeinu would have been the Kohen Gadol. Then we're Moshe Rabbeinu says, Mata Bosh, the Kat Mivcharta. You've been chosen even for this. That goes with the turf. That goes with the turf. You're right. You're going to have to. You're going to have to. That's the way it goes in life. That's the way it goes in life. With the position goes the criticism. Everybody goes through it, and that's what you have to take on. And you have the responsibility because Hashem appointed you. I had a Rav. I know a big Rav. I don't want to say his name, but he told me very big Rav. He told me that he was in his shul. I think I mentioned this to you guys once. He was in his shul. He became a rabbi of a shul. And he sensed that one of the people in the shul did not like him. And so he couldn't understand why this guy doesn't like him. So finally, and the guy made it very clear that he doesn't like the rabbi. Finally, he waited on Yom Kippur, right before Ne'ilah, on Yom Kippur. The Rav of the shul walked over to this guy, and he said to him, look, Harold, I know you don't like me, and I'm wondering if I did ever something to offend you. Please tell me. I'd like to ask forgiveness. He says, Rabbi, I hate your guts. Because the Rav told me this. The guy said to him, Rabbi, I hate your guts. He goes, why? What have I ever done? He says, Rabbi, every time you speak, you make me feel guilty. He said, okay, now I know I'm doing my job right. It's not easy. You're going to get, there's always going to be somebody. And most everybody says, listen, that goes with the turf. Yeah, you're going to get what do you call it? You're going to get criticized. Andrew, call it don't resist. Oh, by the way, before I turn it off, if I just want to announce again that anybody who's interested in either the Shabbos, how to run a Shabbos table, or how to learn learning Gemara with your son, it's available now on, what did I call it last time? It's on, a website. There's a website, DovidBKaplan.com. DovidBKaplan.com. Somebody set up a website. So it's available. You go straight to the website, you can get it. Yeah, somebody had a question.
Yeah, that was me. I'm getting that Dovid B. Kaplan.
.com, yeah, .com.
Yeah, but so the story about the Rav is every Yid's kind of in that position now in the world that they have to kind of choose between MS and peace, and like, especially, so I don't really understand, like, it's just a case by case, like, choose your battles.
You have to choose your, listen, he wasn't even looking for battles, he's just getting, sometimes a Rav of a shul, you get up and you have to talk, you're just saying, even if you give a share, just saying what the Parsha says. I didn't say it, God said it. God said you can't eat pork, and this guy loves pork. You're making me feel guilty. Listen, I can't talk about anything then. They always tell you, when you go into these shuls where people aren't observant, so you have to be careful what you talk about. If you're careful what you talk about, what are you going to talk about? A book review or some of the other trite things that they normally do in some of these synagogues? Get up and teach Torah. You feel bad about it? What can I do?
For example, if you need them to like you, like what if it's your parents? Like your parents, if you come home and your parents are like,
don't preach.
Frum weirdo.
Don't preach.
Yeah.
I can't compromise my principles. Nobody told you to preach. Be nice, be sweet, honor your parents. But if your parents say, "Well, we don't think that you should wear tzitzis," no, it's not really my choice. Not really my choice. That I can't compromise on. Mm-hmm. It's tricky, and it takes a lot of diplomacy. All right, thank you very much, Andrew.
Welcome back,